The villain always monologues. He has the hero on his knees, disarmed, the gun already raised, and instead of pulling the trigger, he starts explaining himself. Robert McKee spent a career teaching the world's best screenwriters, and he calls that moment the single most difficult code to crack in all of action writing. McKee wants to know why the highest paid storytellers on Earth still cannot get out of that room honestly. Everyone knows the villain talks too long. Nobody can explain why the scene survives anyway, why the same audiences who groan at it would riot if you cut it out. Because they would. McKee's claim is that this is not a lazy habit. It is the load-bearing wall of the most popular story form human beings have ever made, and when a writer fakes his way through it, the audience feels robbed even when they cannot say what was stolen. McKee is not an action guy. He is the man Hollywood sends its writers to when a script will not work, a Fulbright scholar whose former students have won more than 60 Academy Awards, whose books on story and character and dialogue have been translated into 23 languages. He dedicated this one to his wife. 5 words. Your love rescues my life. Then, in 2022, he did the least respectable thing a story theorist can do. He wrote a book defending explosions. Because the scale of the thing had become impossible to ignore. Action, in his words, is the world's most popular storytelling genre. Tens, perhaps hundreds of thousands of iterations across page, screen, and game in the last century alone. Clichés litter its landscape. The sheer volume of it has pushed the whole form to what he calls the saturation point. And in a story department in Los Angeles, a chart hung on a wall. Remember the chart. Therefore, McKee goes hunting for the single scene that decides whether an action story is any good, and he finds it exactly where the audience finds it, at the moment the hero has nothing left. He calls it the mercy scene, the weaponless protagonist at his weakest, the weapon-rich antagonist at his most powerful. And then the scene, McKee writes, calls for the hero to somehow turn tables on the villain and come out on top. Somehow. That one word is the entire problem. Because the history of action, he says, is littered with letdowns. So here is the question a stranger could ask about any action film ever made. Why doesn't the villain just kill him? Not why does the villain gloat? Why does the writer let him? But the real pressure on the writer does not come from the craft. It comes from the crowd. Storygoers, McKee says, love the core event of their favorite kind of story. And when a telling skips that scene, or fumbles it, audiences and readers react as if robbed at gunpoint. They cannot name the failure. They feel it somewhere under the sternum, and they quietly do not come back for the sequel. The writer is being graded by people who are physically unable to tell him what he got wrong. Which is why the characters inside these films keep explaining the villain to each other. In Alien, Ripley asks a crewman how to kill the thing, and what she gets back is a sales pitch. A perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility. In The Dark Knight, Batman writes the Joker off as one more criminal, and Alfred talks him out of it. Some men just want to watch the world burn. Neither of those is a description. They are warnings, delivered by someone trying to change a decision. 3 roles, McKee says, and only 3. Hero, villain, victim. Altruism, narcissism, helplessness. Heroes draw empathy, victims draw sympathy, villains draw antipathy. And the value underneath all of it is never justice, never love. It is life and death, and nothing else. Therefore, McKee makes a decision that inverts 40 years of his own teaching. Stop designing the hero. Heroes barely change at all. The inner natures of heroes rarely change. The story gets built from the other end. The invention of an action story, he writes, begins with the design of its villain. Now here comes the good part. Stonehenge. The year 200. Underneath the stones, a box. In a season finale of Doctor Who, the Doctor finds the Pandorica, a prison built to hold the most fearsome being in the universe, just as the sky above him fills with alien warships. Every enemy he has ever beaten, arriving at once, he looks up, mildly irritated, and tells them all to hold still, because he is talking. They hold still. Then he lists them. Every black day he ever stopped them. And he suggests, very generously, that somebody else should go first. One by one, the ships think it over, and they leave. Then the box hums open. He looks inside. Empty. And every one of those enemies, cooperating for the first time in 5 decades of television, grabs him and locks him in. The Pandorica now holds precisely what it advertised. Remember how he got in there? It matters later. So, build a villain nobody can beat. You know the plan going in, which is the point. You are meant to watch it fail. Attempt 1 is raw power, and the rule behind it is real. Weak forces of antagonism do not generate excitement in any story, let alone action. The villain has to tower over the hero, so give him everything. It collapses immediately, and 2 shapeshifters show you why. In Terminator 2, the T-1000 cannot build a weapon heavier than its own liquid body, so when it chases the Connor's car, it turns its hands into hooks and hauls itself up onto the trunk, and the T-800 simply shoots away the panel those hooks are gripping. In Terminator 3, the TX has no limits at all. It can grow cannons out of its arms, so it climbs onto the roof of a moving car and slowly saws a hole in it, which gives the hero all the time he needs to get away. McKee's verdict is merciless. The T-1000's limitations inspire ingenuity. The unlimited TX seems strangely dim-witted and incompetent. The same disease infects heroes. Green Lantern can construct anything he imagines. A helicopter is falling onto a rooftop party, so he wraps it in a giant Hot Wheels chassis, builds a racetrack, and spins it in circles until it stops. Why not just land it? Attempt 2 is numbers. Give him an army. But henchmen, McKee notes, are notoriously easy to outsmart and overcome. And as more and more bodies pile up, repetition breeds boredom. Attempt 3 nearly works. Give him a plan. 5 requirements: rational, probable, dangerous, rewarding, and specific to who he is. Look at what that actually produces. In Die Hard with a Vengeance, the villain announces over the radio that he intends to bomb a school in New York City and refuses to say which one. The entire police force stampedes out to evacuate every school there is. Then he empties a gold vault on Wall Street, the one district in Manhattan that contains no schools. McKee reports that the scheme was convincing enough that the FBI came and questioned the screenwriter to check whether he was planning to do it himself. And then a warning that doubles as a diagnosis for half the films you have ever sat through. Villains plan for success and prepare for failure, not the other way around. Attempt 4. Give him a secret. But a secret only counts if exposing it detonates something. In Batman Begins, the villain turns out to have been masquerading as a different villain, and nothing moves. The plan continues. The chase continues. McKee closes the door on it in 9 words. The secret was not worth keeping or discovering. 4 attempts. The villain gets stronger every single time, and the hero still has no way out of that room. Then McKee stops the argument and changes what the argument is about. He is not talking about movies anymore. He is talking about who gets to hold power, and what they do once they have it. Listen to how slowly he lays it down. Every tyrannical system in history, he names fascism, communism, imperialism, runs on one story. People are helpless. Society is rotting. Order can only be restored by surrendering to a strong, noble leader who descends from above, kills the bad people, saves the good people, and then goes home. That is an action movie. That precise shape. Tyrants have been telling it for a century. And McKee answers it in a single flat line. This myth is a lie, and always has been. The Hitlers of history never leave. So the clock in this book was never a bomb timer. The clock is that the most popular story form on Earth doubles as the most efficient propaganda ever designed, and every writer working inside it is either exposing that or repeating it. Therefore, every shortcut writers use to escape the mercy scene has to be tested again. One at a time, they break. The oldest shortcut is a weakness. Give the villain a flaw, let the hero pull the string. But McKee closes this from both sides. Plant the flaw early and the audience sees it coming. The veteran storygoer, of course, can see an Achilles heel coming long before the mercy scene puts it in play. Plant it late and it is a god lowered on a rope. Deus ex machina, he notes, just wears cheaper costumes now. Deus ex partner, Deus ex lover, Deus ex cops, Deus ex luck. Two masked villains settle it. Bane, in The Dark Knight Rises, absorbs a life-saving painkiller through his mask. The moment you learn that, you have already watched the ending. The film even stages an earlier fight where Batman strikes the mask and nothing happens. And nobody in the cinema was fooled. Darth Vader also cannot breathe without his mask. But you do not find that out until the last minutes of Return of the Jedi, when he is already dying and asks his son to take it off. McKee? He had no Achilles heel, that we knew of. Next plank. Jokes. Mocking the villain is supposed to prove the hero's nerve. But in the Avengers, Loki is called mad as a bag of cats, compared to an insect, and has his magic scepter dismissed as a glow stick. Tony Stark mocks him 4 separate times in one scene. The Hulk throws him around like a rag doll. Added together, McKee argues, the insults washed away Loki's aura of power. The heroes talk their own villain into harmlessness. Last plank, and this is the one that hurts. Spectacle cannot rescue a scene that does not turn. In The Matrix, Neo fights Agent Smith for 5 minutes in a subway station and wins. And it works. Because on the far side of it, Neo believes he is the one. In The Matrix Reloaded, Neo fights 100 Agent Smiths for 10 minutes in a park, flying, and McKee's assessment is that it bores almost immediately. Nothing changed charge. It only delivered information. Smith is back, and there are lots of him. Progression, not repetition. Run the same beat 3 times, McKee says, and the third one inverts on you. Tragic, then gloomy, then comic. And now, the chart. 50-odd years ago, researchers at Columbia Pictures went through the box office receipts and found that hits turned 6 to 8 major times per film, instead of the usual 3 or 4. The conclusion they drew was that explosive reversals sell tickets. Turn more, sell more. So they drew the Whammo Chart, turning points plotted against page numbers, and instructed the story department to hold every submitted screenplay up against it. Matches went upstairs. Everything else went back in the envelope. Columbia, the studio that had won more Best Picture Oscars than any other, did not make Rocky, or Patton, or Raging Bull, The Deer Hunter, The French Connection, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, not The Godfather, not Star Wars. Star Wars is where the second formula came from. After the film hit, George Lucas said publicly that he had taken his story ideas from Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces. Hollywood concluded that Campbell's pattern was the key to money, and manual after manual has recycled it ever since. There is a good chance you have been taught it. McKee's account of what came next is quiet, and it is ruinous. Anthropologists and mythologists did not confirm Campbell. They contradicted him. He had bent Otto Rank and Carl Jung in ways he knew both men would reject. He ignored every case that disagreed with him. He leaned on obscure tales from obscure tribes that nobody could go and check. And when he needed an example and did not have one, McKee writes, he just made them up. 4 decades of screenwriting instruction resting on that. So go back to Stonehenge. The doctor did not lose to superior firepower. He talked an entire sky into leaving, and then walked into a box, because he could not resist being the one who talks. His greatest strength was the door. That is McKee's answer, and it has been sitting in the open since the first pages. The villain does not spare the hero because he is stupid. He spares him out of vanity. Vanity drives the villain to gloat over the hapless hero. The monologue is not the writer's failure, it is the villain's only crack, and it is made of the exact material that made him unstoppable. Therefore, the method. First, gather. Research and imagine a one-of-a-kind villain, so dazzling, so formidable that she cannot be outdone. Then swing the chessboard around, take the hero's side, and beat your own creation. No cheating. Then execute. Watch it run in Die Hard. John McClane, barefoot, bleeding, hands in the air, 2 guns pointed at his chest. He does the one thing nobody in that room is braced for. He laughs at how absurd the standoff is. They get the joke. They crack up. And in the half-second their aim drifts, he reaches for the pistol he taped to his own back, kills one man, wounds Hans Gruber, and eventually drops him 30 floors. Outsmarted and overpowered in a single move. Except, and this is the part that makes the book worth your money, it fails again. Because the instant a solution that good exists, it stops being a solution. The Joker's plan in The Dark Knight hinges on getting himself caught, which is the Trojan horse, 32 centuries old. Over the next 2 years, McKee counts, The Dark Knight Rises, Skyfall, Star Trek Into Darkness, and A Good Day to Die Hard, all recycled it into an ever sillier cliché. Every cliché in action, he writes, started life as somebody's brilliant idea. The reward for cracking the code is watching it turn worthless in public. So dig deeper. McKee's roll call of great villains, Hans Gruber, Agent Smith, the Shark in Jaws, the Joker, the Predator, the Alien, all share one property. They have no built-in weaknesses. There is nothing to pull. And that is the thing that finally works. A villain with no flaw forces the writer down inside the role, hunting for traits we never see coming, but once revealed, we realize we're always there. Something that reads as power in the second act and turns out, in the last one, to be the handle. Not a weakness discovered, a strength inverted. Forget the kneeling man for a moment. The real image in this book is one person at a desk with a chessboard, playing both colors. Build the villain until he cannot be beaten. Then stand up, walk around the table, sit down in the hero's chair, and beat him anyway. No cheating. That is the entire job, and there is no chart on any wall that will do it for you. A form is a universal that includes every possible example. A formula is a cage. And in McKee's words, formulas reduce action to a chain link of clichés. One last thing McKee slips in near the end. The oldest action story we have is the Epic of Gilgamesh, 4,000 years old. And the hero fails. Every adventure collapses. He does not come back with the elixir of life. He saves nobody, not his friend, not himself. Death has the ultimate power. That one is still being read.